I'm going to be talking to you today about how apologetics keeps so many of us stuck and unaware that there's a next level that's going to increase great amount of clarity and massive confidence for your worldview. I'm going to give you strategies for how to get out of this paradigm and move into a much more valuable paradigm that's going to set you up for no longer leaning on other voices, but leaning on your own voice and what it's like to take ownership of every single thing you believe and your worldview, so that no matter what happens, you have an anti-fragile foundation. Let's move into the video. So we need to be able to apply the fundamentals. And so if right now the only thing keeping you and retaining your worldview is by searching out for those answers, go do that. Let that ease your emotions. Let that calm your nervous system. That is perfectly fine to do. And I would honestly say that you may even need it, but don't exist there and don't stay there for too long. What I need you to do after that is I need you to go back and I need you to apply the fundamentals. And what do I mean by the fundamentals? Now, before we start to go deeper and things get more abstract, and you're wanting to go through the full process yourself, getting direct feedback from me, no matter where you find yourself in the world, then go ahead to the description and apply for online coaching. This is my way of being able to give you all the lessons that I've ever learned up to this point and customize it to your situation. If that is you, go ahead to the description, submit the application, and in 24 hours, I'll reach back out to you and I'll determine if it makes sense for you and I to work together. Now, let's get back to the video. These are the main pillars of your arsenal of reason, okay? This is what's going to help you gain clarity. It is clarity achievement that explanation helps us get. It is mystery removal that explanation helps us get. However, when we reason under what we can call uncertainty, when we're in a context where things are a little uncertain and we need a system of reasoning for that, what we're actually doing is we're doing something very unique. So if you recall what deductive logic does as a very interesting feature, it is a truth-preserving feature where the conclusion is guaranteed, right, if the premises before it follow from one another. However, what we need to understand is that there are systems for reasoning under uncertainty. There are actual logics for that. We call this plausibility reasoning. And so what you're going to do is you're going to tap into this, okay? So what a lot of people ignore is the function and the very structure of plausibility reasoning. And you know what's really interesting? There's another name for this, okay? It's called probability. This has to be the most confused and misunderstood aspect when it comes to doing this whole thing where we're inference making, reasoning from conclusions, and providing evidence for beliefs in the existence of God, things like that, is the word probability. And we have to be very specific and very precise what we mean by this. And honestly, I see philosophers, as also lay people and apologists alike, mess this up. Okay, so why is this important? Well, ultimately, we use the word probability either colloquially or we use it in its actual formal setting. Probability, you know the term, odds, likelihood, things like that. What we're talking about is we're using the word to refer to when we reason under uncertainty. Now, if there's any mathematicians or statisticians watching, or you're someone that only is familiar with this in a statistics context, let me explain this to you. When we use the word probability in a philosophy context, okay, so it's philosophical, what we mean is we're talking about propositions, and we're talking about applying certain axioms, okay, probability axioms, to propositions. Now, philosophers debate back and forth how the mechanics of this work out, but what I'm trying to explain to you here is the difference between what we can call a mathematical probability, which depends on a certain set of axioms. And if you're familiar with anything with probability, you're probably familiar with the Kolmogorov axioms. Okay, so Kolmogorov developed these axioms, and what ends up happening is over the years, probability theory develops, and you get something eventually called measure theory, and it just involves things like sigma algebras and apply the spaces and normalize areas and things like that. And if it conforms to these axioms, that's usually what we mean by a probability. But that has nothing to do and is very unhelpful to the context when we're analyzing a proposition, a statement which can be true or false. But it's a statement that is not true or false in this very binary way where it's either, deductively false in the certain way, where it's certainly false or it's certainly true. When you're in that middle space and we're trying to reason under uncertainty, we need a different system. So that takes us far afield into the philosophy and the history of probability theory, where we meet this guy named Richard Cox. And he was a physicist, but he developed these axioms where he knew if he extended deductive logic in a way where we could reason under uncertainty, then what ends up happening is he calls that a system for plausibility reasoning. So unlike Kolmogorov, he develops a very specific system for propositions. So you have Kolmogorov axioms where you're dealing with mathematical and statistical probabilistic contexts, and then you have one over here which deals with propositions. These are more normal everyday contexts, specifically the best way to apply it when we're thinking about philosophical context. However, there was one key thing that he discovered, and what he finds out is that actually when you come up with a calculus for propositions, calling that the propositional calculus, it actually ends up being isomorphic with standard probability theory, relying on the different set of axioms from Kolmogorov. But like Cox's conclusion, functionally it ends up being all the same. And the moment you master this pillar, you'll be able to take this and then be able to duplicate it and have diverse applications when you are on your own assessing how plausible you think other ideas are when you come across them. And so again, this is getting you out of the answers-based, the prepackaged paradigm of apologetics and getting you to take ownership. Here are 2 resources for you to follow up with at the end of this video. We have this video on Capturing Christianity. It was an interview with Nevin Klimenhaga, who is a philosopher of probability, and he will help you get a cursory beginner understanding of some of the ideas I've told you about of plausibility reasoning. And the second thing is there's this awesome book by E.T. Jaynes called Probability, the Logic of Science. And now this one is a pretty big slog of a read. It's an academic book. It's not really a read by the fire kind of situation. However, if you want to see where a full and a extreme elaboration of the ideas I've already explained to you are, it's found in that book, and you can track that down, and you can know exactly that I'm not making these things up, but these things are here and they're published and they're well documented. This moves us into the next section, which is the reason why you must move out of this paradigm of seeking answers and having pre-made responses. And the reason why is because it's not going to give you what you are really searching for. Oftentimes, the reason why we search for answers is because we don't like living in the ambiguity of not knowing where we're at. It is an addiction to not wanting to be wrong. Now, in certain circumstances, it's okay to admit, I don't know, I'm going to do further research. But there are certain circumstances which we're all afraid of, which is maybe I need to give up the whole thing. Maybe the whole thing is a sham. And what I will tell you directly from experience from doing this for the last 10 plus years is that is the minority of situations, okay? The majority of situations are going to be, you haven't done enough research yet, and you haven't applied the fundamentals to where you're going yet. So the first thing is, we have to understand that we're going to live in ambiguity as a part of our normal existence in doing our inquiry, okay? The second thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to look at the thing that we're wanting to learn. And we're going to take a deep look at that. And we're going to ask ourselves, why exactly do I feel like I need an answer for this right now? It's because there's a bit of unease that you want put away. And you want someone who's done the work for you in confidence to transfer that energy to you so that you feel good about having something that sounds like it's an answer. But if you actually haven't done the research yourself, how do you know what they're saying is truly the right answer? Well, it sounds good, and maybe they're even heavy on rhetoric, so it tickles those primitive areas in your mind that, hone in on things like tonality shifts, pattern reps, everything like that. You want more than just emotion, okay? You want to understand that my emotions are centered around sound thinking. And this inevitably involves you picking up the frameworks and the systems that can be applied into any situation, which I like to call the arsenal of reason, for you to investigate these topics. This is why I call this full worldview ownership. Because if you look at all the individual beliefs that make up your worldview, you should have all the awareness you need for all the reasons that you have for those beliefs. And if you don't, then that is something that you need to go back and need to do for yourself. However, the distance that you're wanting to travel will only be made up by being able to have a more of a framework thinking rather than an answers-based thinking, where you are developing your own system within a broader framework, right? I'm not telling you to completely deconstruct Christianity. What I'm telling you is that within the Christian system, I want you to look at the individual beliefs that you have, and I want you to subject it to frameworks, principles, the things that are shaping your thinking around these things, so that when you come out on the other end, you actually have full resonance with those beliefs themselves and you know that you've made your worldview your own. People come to me all the time in my coaching program, Tim, can you just give me the answers to these topics? And the thing is I can. I can totally run through the entire cosmological argument with you, show you maybe some plausible stage twos where you can bridge the gap from necessary existence to God. I can give you the whole entire Swinburnian system, and I can go through his orderly complex universe argument, his fine-tuning argument, his argument for the existence of one-bodied moral agents, and compare that against indifferentism, naturalism, cosmopsychism, all these different things, okay? I could do that for you. However, that's not going to help you. What's going to help you is that's going to actually be a consequence of this more fundamental thing that I'm teaching you right now, which is if you have a more frameworks thinking system, where you're aware of the reasons that you have for your beliefs, then what ends up happening is that's just the consequence. It's just a byproduct, having those answers. So you need to do the inner work here, which is instead of focusing on what is the specific connection between objection and answer, instead of looking for that, however, the connection between objection and answer is going to take care of itself once you apply the fundamentals, have these pillars, have the arsenals of reason completely applied. This is why having your foundation grounded in the four main branches of philosophy itself, such as metaphysics, logic, epistemology, and morality and ethics, or I'll put that all under the umbrella of axiology, which is value theory, will take you far. And then you can take that into any situation or any subject matter or any idea that you want to be evaluating. When you do this, you will notice that the internal clarity in your worldview will increase, thus corresponding to the increase in confidence, and that unease that you're no longer wanting to feel will shift down. And then it'll just be an interesting game of collecting different research projects and seeing where you land on different conclusions. So instead of asking for answers to certain things, so your worldview remains intact, or whether or not you want to test the stability of your worldview, you need to be asking the question, not what's the answer, but if I apply the core of good reasoning, what is the conclusion I'm going to come to? And that cannot be preconceived. But it's going to be an interesting journey that you embark on, and you have to enjoy it the whole entire way through. I mean, there's a reason why successful apologists like Michael Jones from Inspiring Philosophy have since 2013 been making videos, and it was only recently that he got his master's in philosophy. All of that was self-taught, doing research himself, and then synthesizing it for himself and putting out his content. I'm not telling you that you have to be wholly original, but what I am telling you is to synthesize for yourself so that ownership happens, so that that level of confidence that you're truly wanting when you're navigating these diverse topics actually gets you to where you want to go, which is massively increased.